Not all watches are created equal, and if you're looking to buy your first luxury or semi-luxury watch, you are understandably worried that you're going to buy a bad watch or the wrong watch for you. Which is why I put together this complete guide where I suggest what you should be considering when buying your first, in quotations, real watch, in the hope that it can help you find the right first watch for you. I'm going to cover quartz versus mechanical in a way that makes sense for first-time buyers. Complications, I'll give you a rundown of the different price ranges there are, what you get and what you don't in them. I'm talking about branding and brand perception, the concept of handmade and craftsmanship, ADs versus the used and gray market, the strengths and pitfalls of known and unknown watch brands, a little bit about style and your personal style, resale value, and some reference watches that are worth knowing. Let's dive in. Quartz is generally a battery-powered watch. It's the modern electronic solution to getting a watch to run. It's the most accurate by 1,000,000 miles. It's the easiest to produce, and it's usually associated with cheaper watches in general. You recognize a quartz watch first and foremost by the seconds hands. It ticks 1 second at a time, where a mechanical watch's seconds hand has a sweep to it. Mechanical, on the other hand, does what it says on the tin. A mechanical watch movement is a complex set of gears, wheels, and springs that mechanically get the hour, minute, and seconds hand to move. It's the oldest technology, it's less accurate, it's less robust, it's in every way not as good as quartz. But to most watch people, it is what you associate with a good watch. Most mechanical watches are made up of multiple intricate parts, but most watchmaking is mass production. It's production lines of people working to build, polish, and assemble the movements that go into the watches. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you would go down the mechanical route. First, in general, if you want a more beautiful, better put together watch, which really has the luxury feel to it, you are most likely going to have to go for a mechanical watch. And this is for no other reason than most manufacturers have decided that quartz is reserved for cheaper watches. A brand like Longines makes quartz watches, but only at their cheapest price point. As you go up the price point to their mechanical watches, the cases, the bracelets, the dials, the features just tend to be better. The same goes for Tissot. They have mechanical and quartz versions of most of their watches, and generally the ones that are a little bit better put together are going to be the mechanical ones. There's the Tissot PRX as an example. If you want the cool textured dial, you have to pay for the mechanical watch. That feature of the textured dial is hidden behind the upgrade to mechanical. This is a rule that holds true for almost all watches except for women's watches. There still is a general approach to women's watches that even high-end women's watches come with quartz. And it's based on an assumption that for women there isn't the same interest in the movement as there is for men. Second, and this is subjective, but mechanical watches and watch movements tend to be cooler. If you're a tech bro, it might not interest you, but there is an allure for a lot of people to the fact that you can take a 500-year-old technology, only with gears and springs and an oscillating balance wheel, and you can get a watch to not just tell the time within 1 second accuracy per day, but also deliver an infinite calendar that will keep the date accurate for 400,000 years. That's the technical part. And then there's the aesthetic. The higher up you go in price, the more brands invest in making good-looking movements. There's an artistry that, barring a few notable exceptions, just doesn't go into the decoration of quartz movements. Third, it's nostalgic. We're in a tech world, and something that doesn't need a power bank and lithium-ion batteries, but just works based on you winding it or you just moving your arm, is cool. If you're new to the watch world, if you're new to watch collecting, or if you're just new to my channel, then click the subscribe button below. On this channel, I talk about watches and watch brands and all things watch-related, which I have a deep passion for. I'm unbiased, I'm honest, and I'm in nobody's pocket. Click subscribe. Thanks a ton. Complications are things done to the movement that make it capable of doing more. There are more complications than I can mention, but the classic ones you should be aware of are, of course, the basic time and date. Telling the date is a complication. Then you can get a watch that can tell the day. From there, you can get moon phases, chronographs, which are stopwatches in varying configurations, chiming alarm clock mechanisms, annual calendars, perpetual calendars. These are watches that can calculate a full date, where the perpetual will take into account things like leap years mechanically. Then you have GMTs and world timers that can track more than one time zone at the same time, which is good for travel. And there are a million more. Complications cost more money, and some complications are ridiculously expensive. Why? Because it's harder to build mechanically, and in part, just like quartz, some complications are hidden behind a precious metal paywall. The Rolex Datejust is a steel watch that tells the date and time. It costs about $13,000. The Rolex Day-Date has the ability to also tell the day. Mechanically, that's the only difference. But the day date is not available in steel. It's gold or platinum only, so you have to throw in about $35,000, $40,000 or more to get a hold of that complication from Rolex. It doesn't exist in the modern lineup in a steel option. The other thing you need to know, honestly, most people don't need a complication. Most people don't need a watch. Maybe you do want a chronograph so you can boil your eggs or something. But I'd argue that you get the complication because you think it's cool, and importantly, the complication will do something aesthetically to the watch. Something happens to the dial that makes the watch more visually interesting. Price tiers. You have a budget and you're asking yourself, what can I get for that amount? And if I spend a little bit more, then what do I get? So I've got these intervals that I'll walk you through. $0 to $500, $500 to $1,500, $1,500 to $3,000, $3,000 to $10,000, $10,000 to $15,000, and $15,000 plus. Now keep in mind, most brands stay exactly in these price points. So Rolex starts at $6,000, but their most expensive watch costs over $50,000. So what we're talking about is the sort of entry to the main range of a brand's lineup is where they start in one of these brackets. For $0 to $500, you are mostly getting Quartz watches. There are a few exceptions, but it's not common. Western brands are almost exclusively Quartz in this range. For a newbie, it's going to be hard to relate to terms like finishing and milling versus stamping and tolerances, so I'll keep it simple. Bracelets will usually be solid, but will have a jingle-jangle sound like quality to them compared to even $1,000 watches. The materials are technically the same, but the bracelets are often a little bit looser. The clasps have less modern mechanisms, and over time, these watches do tend to get loose. The glass over the dial is not always going to be high-end sapphire crystal. It's going to be acrylic or something similar. These are materials that are cheaper. Some scratch more easily. Some don't have quite the clarity of the glass you find on a high-end watch. I'd say that these are watches that are going to look and feel to most people like they are visibly affordable. In Chinese factory brands, you can get watches that probably cost closer to $1,000 from a Western brand. The pure manufacturing quality is just higher, but you have to import from China. You have to deal with import duties, and consumer protections and ease of return are just not the same. The Chinese factory brand watches in this price point are fairly consistently better than the Western and Japanese competitors. Good name brands in the space are Citizen, Casio, Timex, to some extent Seiko. You'll find very few European or Swiss brands in this price point these days that aren't fashion brands. From $500 to $1,500, a lot happens. If you take a Tissot PRX, which costs around $600-700, and compare the pure build quality of that watch to a $2,000 Tudor, it will take most people some time to find the differences. The gap is, relatively speaking, quite small, but the jump from the sub-$500 watches is quite huge. Bracelets in this price point are excellent. Clasps are excellent. You might not get cool features always like easy adjust, but the core mechanisms are of a very high standard. Generally, cases start to get more detailing below $500. Watches that are polished have a cheap sheen to them that disappears above $500. It just looks better. You also start to see that dials look better. It's a mix of quality in terms of materials, but also in terms of variety. You're more likely to see textured dials or more intricate detailing in general that makes for a more premium product. You start to get mechanical movements as well. These mechanical movements are often reasonably good. They're not the most accurate in the world. Not all of them have important anti-magnetic properties, but you're in a space where the movements are known for being reliable and serviceable. $1,500 to $3,000 is the space I personally believe is the top value space for watches at the moment. This is where you get the maximum amount of watch for the money while paying relatively little for branding, marketing, and identity on top. A lot happens in this space that is important for you as a buyer. Those movements that I talked about. In this space, power reserve jumps from often 40 hours to 60, 70, or 80 hours. The movements are now made of special materials that are anti-magnetic. There's better shock absorption. They are also usually significantly more accurate. You'll hear about things like COSC certification and similar certifications that guarantee for mechanical watches very good accuracy. When it comes to the watch case and the bracelet, only premium materials are being used. The glass is going to be sapphire crystal consistently. They're going to have anti-reflective coatings. The bracelets and cases are going to be excellent, and they'll have usually every technical feature you want. So they'll have easy adjust, they'll have a quick release mechanism so you can switch bracelets whenever you want. Things will feel noticeably premium to the touch. Initially, you might find a bracelet at $1,000 that just feels as good, and it is likely, but the thing that differentiates these $1,500 to $3,000 cases and bracelets is the details. You'll find a chamfer here and there with crisp polish. You'll find more mixes of finishings, and on close inspection, it's just going to be crisper in general. Dials also really get a lift. If you go back to a $1,000 watch, you'll find a nice dial, but the hands will be sharper and crisper on the $2,000 watch. A sunray pattern is going to usually at least be more detailed, more nuanced, better finished. You'll find some of those things in cheaper watches, but not consistently. From $1,500 to $3,000, you'll usually find all of it. And this is where you see brands like Tudor, Longines, Nomos, Zen. $3,000 to $10,000 is a huge range, but it reflects quite well what's going on here and why we've, in part, left the value space. You can get an entry-level Bremont for around $5,000, Breitling for $6,000, an Omega Aquaterra will set you back $7,000-ish, and you can get a Rolex Oyster Perpetual for around $7,000 as well. Your first consideration for this price range is, do I buy an entry-level watch from a brand in this price range, or do I buy a higher-end watch from the value space that we just talked about? The Tudor Black Bay 1 costs about $4,000, where the Aquaterra is $7,000. For $3,000 more, you get an even more accurate movement with a display caseback where you can see a very beautifully finished movement. If you look really closely, you'll see that the Omega dials are better done. The hands are a little bit sharper, the plots are a little bit more precise, but honestly, can you tell that it's worth $3,000 more? Probably not. If you take a $3,100 Longines Spirit and compare it to a Breitling Top Time, most people are also going to be hard pressed to explain what the extra $3,000 is getting you. And I can only say two things. There are differences, but it is very much a case of the devil is in the details. A $10,000 Rolex has similar plots to the Black Bay 41 that costs about half. But those plots on the Rolex are made out of white gold. It's not a lot of white gold, but it makes a difference in terms of price, but also in terms of shine and reflectivity. The Submariner has etching on the Riho, which is not something you might appreciate, but it's a little thing that the Black Bay doesn't have, and it adds to the premiumness of the Rolex. In this price range, the brands are usually, and I'll get back to that, not skimping. They throw in everything that makes for a very premium experience, but they are also premium brands, and they do charge a premium for it. $1,500 to $3,000, that's the space where the brands are selling their watches on a value proposition. Above $3,000, the value proposition is not value. It's status, it's beauty, it's luxury, it's refinement. It's backed up by a superior product, but there is a marketing price you pay. That applies to Rolex, applies to Omega, it applies to Jaeger-LeCoultre, Grand Seiko, IWC, and hundreds more. Is it exactly $10,000 where this price range starts? Not quite. But there is a group of brands where their bread and butter watches are in this space. It's Blancpain in this space, it's Glashütte Original to some extent. They do have cheaper watches, but the way I like to think of it, their watches are more expensive than Rolex, but cheaper than Patek, Lange, and Vacheron. Because that's what this space is. This is for the brands that don't want to be in the premium Omega, Breitling, and Rolex space, and they want to offer more than somebody like Rolex. Basically, nobody wants to go head-to-head with Rolex, so they either go cheaper with the same or more value and features, or they go more expensive and offer something extra. So what are they offering extra? In a concept, some things are handmade. All the way up to Rolex, you should be thinking of most watchmaking as mass production. There are people that sit at a machine and polish cases. There are people that assemble the movements, but the movements are made by machine. The finishing is done by a machine, and nobody has hand engraved a case. To offer more, brands like Blancpain, JLC to some extent, Glashütte Original, will do some things by hand. Case in point, the Glashütte Panomatic is a $12,500 watch. It's in stainless steel, but the movement has a double swan neck regulator. Now don't worry, you don't need to know what that is. What you do need to know is that the bridges holding the regulator is engraved by hand. Somebody sat with a little engraving tool and engraved that bridge. It not only looks cool, but there's a level of detail there that Rolex, Omega, and Breitling don't put into their watches. Jaeger-LeCoultre, also as an example, charge almost $15,000. That's expensive for a duo-face reverso, but you're paying for two faces and a movement that works on both faces, and you can independently set the time so you can track two time zones. That just doesn't compare with any single face Rolex. At this price point, you might get a better movement. but not necessarily. You're likely going to find Breitling, Omega, and Rolexes that on the pure specifications operate better. You're in a space where technical specs aren't always the key. This is where aesthetics and detail really are what you're paying for. And then we get to above $15,000, which essentially goes up to $1 million. This price point goes from Patek and Vacheron starter watches all the way up to F. Bijoux and Grubel Forsey that make watches that cost up to $1 million. A lot of things happen in this space. First of all, brands generally transition to precious metals. Steel is exceedingly rare. This is a space where luxury and having something that very few other people have is important. So they gatekeep with precious metals, and that automatically tax on $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to a watch. When there are steel watches, they are often super limited and reserved for people that have already bought their fair share of brands' special precious metal models. Second, the customer expects high horology, so a lot is done by hand, or at a minimum include very complex time-consuming techniques. And the example is the Saxonia Thin from Lange & Söhne. It's $26,000 for a time-only watch that looks, honestly, not a lot different from a $1,500 Nomos Zurich. But then you get to the movement. Every edge has a chamfer that is hand polished to absolute perfection. The balance bridge is hand decorated. The gradation of the striping on the 3/4 plate is far above anything you'll find on an Omega or a Rolex. You're paying for details, precision, nuance. But you're also buying watches from brands that know that their customers are willing to pay more simply to know that few other people can afford them. The margins in this space are massive, especially with the more established brands. They know they can charge a premium for their product, and they do. You won't find a Vacheron Constantin where someone with a straight face and any knowledge of what they're talking about is claiming that a Zenith Defy is just as well made. The Vacheron is going to be on another level. But Vacheron does know what to charge for their premium products. Generally, I'd make the argument that there's more value to be had from less mainstream brands. Vacheron, Richard Mille, AP Patek tend to charge more or give you less compared to what you can get from Grönefeld or Grubel Forsey. A Grubel Forsey costs about close to, $1 million, but one watch takes over 5,000 man-hours to make, and the salary alone of one Grubel Forsey employee chews up a lot of that cost. I'm talking about branding and brand perception. You pay for brand. End of story. The higher up the position of the brand, the more the brand has a price. Like I said, this really kicks in above $3,000, but it's a thing. Watches are not a functional product. Watches are not tools. They are jewelry and they are status symbols. Especially when you're paying $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000, most people are making some sort of statement to themselves or to the world. What the individual brand story means to you is personal, but buying a Rolex, AP, or Breitling is something people do for a reason. And it doesn't have to be a deep reason, but there is a meaning that is being applied to the purchase. Craftsmanship. I've covered this in part in the price range run through, but the easiest way for you to think about it is this way. Tier 1 of watches is mass-produced watches with basic features and basic quality standards. Tier 2 of watches is still mass-produced watches with some modern features and better quality standards. Tier 3 is the all-round good quality product with all the good features and really good quality standards. Tier 4, still mass-produced with a brand premium that is underpinned by having all the bells and whistles to make it feel and look and wear like a premium luxury wearing experience. Tier 5 is mass-produced with finesse and hand detailing. And Tier 6 is the ultimate status symbol with tons of finesse, devil in the details, nuance, and a price that assumes you don't have to ask about the price. You can buy your new watch from essentially 4 sources. Directly from an authorized dealer, online through a reseller, through a local reseller, or through the broader grey market. Generally, if you go down to the authorized dealer, you're going to be paying full price. The days of negotiating discounts are not gone, but it's more rare. It will depend on the watch you buy, how in demand it is, and the specific authorized dealer. The AD experience, though, is one of safety and security. If something is wrong, you go down to the store. They will handle everything for you and they will always be there. They hand hold you and they might even give you a free Pepsi to drink while you wait for the transaction to go through. Going online might get you a good deal. It might also get you a in-demand watch at a premium. It has all the strengths and weaknesses of online shopping. The only thing I personally have is that buying a $10,000 watch online without having tried it is just weird to me. I'll happily buy a blender online, but not a car or a watch. Then there's your local store who isn't an authorized dealer. They are essentially gray dealers, but I differentiate in the sense that the more local guys deal mainly in used watches and have a more limited supply. They're typically real watchmakers that are super knowledgeable and are really, really helpful. They'll give you a good price, they'll give you good service, and just like the AD, they will always be there to help you. But they're not necessarily going to want to source a hyper desirable AP for you. And then there's the gray market, which is huge. It's online, it's physical, it's local, it's global. This is everything from that street in New York, and I forget the number of it, but it's a street where it's just full of watch dealers. Some of them a lot sketchier than others. And from there, it's also online dealers who will meet you face to face and have some kind of storefront somewhere. This will get you whatever you want as long as you're willing to pay. There are discounts to be had on a lot of watches, but you have to be willing to negotiate. These are consistently wheeler dealers, and there's always room for negotiation. Not all gray market dealers are sketchy, but it is a space where you can get burned. So you have to use whatever resources you have at your disposal to verify the trustworthiness of the seller. You have to remember this. In the gray market space, you are not just buying the watch, you are buying the dealer. Next question. Do I buy a known brand that I recognize from the local AD, or do I get something from an unknown brand? And I've got some rules of thumb. Name brands tend to have better after-sales service. Known brands tend to be more consistent in quality. Known brands like Omega and Judah and Rolex tend to be more readily serviceable. Name brands tend to be able to get away with charging a little bit more also because of the name recognition. Lesser known brands are the opposite of this. They can be much better value with a lot more watch for the money, but they might not be as consistent in quality and they might not be as easily serviceable. You can go into any store and they will be able to service your Omega. Go into a store with a Ming watch and they'll politely suggest that you contact an official reseller or the manufacturer directly. The longer the relatively speaking unknown brand has been around, the less concerned I typically am. Also, in this day and age, manufacturing tends to be so good that general base quality is rarely a problem. But do beware. If you're buying your stuff on Temu, there's no guarantee that you're getting something that's going to work in 3 months' time. Resale value. You need to know 2 things. 1, 99.9% of all watches in the world lose value the instant you walk out of the door of the AD. It's very, very few watches that even remotely hold their value. After 2 years, don't expect to recoup more than 50% of your purchase price. That's obviously going to be dependent on a million different factors. The brand, the wear and tear, the market, all sorts of stuff. But just get in your head that at best, you will get half back. I've sold enough watches to know that expecting more on average after 2 years is unrealistic. What about style and your personal style? Here's a fact that I know from every AD I've ever talked to, because I ask them every single time. How many customers per day walk directly to the Rolex display? More than 90%. Now, my point isn't about Rolex. My point is, too many people just hear of some brand and then they make a beeline straight for that brand. Do yourself a favor. Look at more watches. There are thousands of brands out there. There are so many options, so many variants, and so many styles. You do yourself a disservice by not seeking out options and comparison. Small nuances can mean a lot in terms of you really ending up loving your watch. An Omega Aquaterra and a Nomus Club Sport are both positioned as luxury sports watches. They are aimed at almost the exact same customer, but they are markedly different in look, feel, and personality. If you just went straight to Omega, you wouldn't know the Nomus existed, and that would have limited your options. That's the first thing. The second thing, when you buy a watch, match it to the clothing you most commonly wear. If you're going to be wearing it with a suit, then show up in a suit to try it out. If you're wearing a Rolex and usually wear jeans and a t-shirt, then that's what you show up at the AD wearing. Make sure you get a feel for how the watch works with your full outfit. Don't just do a wrist shot. Take a full-length photo and consider how it works for you. Third, take someone with you. Don't make them decide, but let them give you feedback. Lastly, if you do a wrist shot, use a 35mm focal length. If you use the wrong focal length, the watch will look either bigger or smaller on your wrist, depending on the focal length, and you'll get a wrong reference point. Finally, and this is going to be the most controversial piece, for each price range, I'll give you a known and an unknown brand that I feel are a good reference point for the price point. That doesn't mean they are always the best in that price range. It means that their watches are a good exemplification of what you should reasonably expect to be getting for the price. Under $500, Timex is a pretty good example of a Western brand and what you can get. From China, I would say San Martin. That is a good reflection of what you can get at that price point. From $500 to $1,500, the name brand that you should compare to is Tissot. The unknown, Zin. From $1,500 to $3,000. The reference brands are Longines and Seiko. The lesser known brand, relatively speaking, is somebody like Nomos. From $3,000 to $10,000, Omega or Rolex are the reference points. Among the lesser known brands, Frederic Constant, and just to frustrate people, Grand Seiko. They are lesser known in the context of this price point. They sell a fraction of what Rolex does, but they are an incredibly good example of what you can reasonably expect at this price point. What I'm suggesting you're doing is if you take an IWC, for example, you're looking at IWC Pilot Mark 20, ask the store clerk to bring you a Grand Seiko at the same price and compare those two, because the reference point of the Grand Seiko will tell you what you're getting or what you can get for that price. 10 to 15,000, the reference is Glashütte Original, the lesser known, Gérard Perregaux. Over 15,000, that's a huge range, so it's really, really hard, but reference brands are AP, Grübel Forsey, FP Journe. Lesser known brands, broadly speaking, because enthusiasts are all going to know them, De Bethune, Grönefeld, Beauvais. Now that was a lot of information. Buying a watch can be as easy as waltzing down to the store and buying something you like, and that's hopefully how it should be. Most watches are pretty good these days, and you rarely get something that falls apart after 3 days. You're not getting cheated, but depending on what you want, you pay for different things. But if you want to research a little bit more, I hope this overview helped you out. If you have more questions, put them in the comments and I'll respond to as many as possible. Thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe. Cheers.